Good evening. My name is Diane Nykum, and I'm the Elementary Curriculum Supervisor in Parkland. I'd like to thank you all for joining us this evening for our parent preview night of our fifth grade program, Puberty and Reproductive Health, sponsored by Lehigh Valley Health Network. Thank you to Lehigh Valley Health Network for being such good partners with us. I'd like to welcome tonight our presenter from LVHN, Maggie Jabay.
Hello, you guys. So my name is Maggie. I'm from Weller Health Education at Lehigh Valley Hospital. So what Weller is, we're a program that runs through the network. It's through a foundation that existed way before I was even born. It's a foundation that's been around for a very long time. If anybody's ever from Easton, you may remember the Weller Center from downtown Easton, where the Easton Public Market currently is. So I actually went there as a kid as a field trip. What Weller does is they just try to promote health to children of all ages, from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. Once the actual Weller Center closed down, the program itself was acquired by the network. So LVHN won the bid and Weller got to join them. And that was where I came in and became a part of this really awesome program that I'm very passionate about. So what Weller does currently is we provide really awesome health education programs to K through 12. So on the average day, I am traveling to different schools doing different programs. Obviously, with COVID, that made things a little bit different. So I went from being in schools every single day to, when the lockdown happened, to completely being in my house every single day. So it was definitely a really big change for me. But Weller, we definitely adapted as we're doing it right now. So we used to do this program in person. So the first time I ever did it was in person. I think it was at Fogelsville Elementary. And then we moved to virtual just to make things a little bit easier with the pandemic. So Weller definitely adapted very quickly. We've been doing some virtual programs with synchronous with different teachers. And we've also been making really awesome YouTube videos, so like asynchronous programs. So my resume has definitely expanded, which has been very fun for me. So Weller, we do a lot of different programs. We do everything from drug education to nutrition to, we did bullying today. All the way up to things like depression, mental health. So we do a lot of different programs. So I'm definitely never bored. I'm always doing so many different things that always keep me on my toes and keep me interested, and the kids as well. But definitely my favorite program by far is our puberty program, Puberty and Reproductive Health. So this was something I was very passionate about from the start of me joining Weller. And it's something I've been continuing to love doing, especially when like the spring rolls around and it is completely puberty time. So when I first started, we mostly just did the Parkland elementary schools for their puberty program, with an occasional school district here and there. But I feel like every year more and more schools are loving our program. So now we're doing puberty for all of Parkland School District, for all of their elementary schools, Allentown School District, and Bethlehem. So I am doing puberty, everybody, from March until June. So every day, almost every day, I'm waking up and teaching puberty, which means my spring is going to be very fun. So in this coming spring, I will be doing the puberty program for all of your fifth graders, something I'm very much looking forward to. The fifth grade students in Parkland are always really awesome, and I'm very excited about it. So we're doing this little preview tonight so you guys can get a sense of what I'll be talking about. I do, like I said, I do this very often. So it's become kind of like second nature for me for this puberty program, but it's great for you guys just to kind of see and anticipate what the kids are going to be learning. I try to answer as many questions as I can when I'm doing the programs, but of course, as you guys know, your children are very curious. They may come home to you guys and have more questions. So we're going to be talking about this program, maybe giving you guys a little education if anybody kind of forgot their puberty talk when they were in fifth grade, as well as some tips at the end. So a couple of tips about puberty, talking to your child about puberty that hopefully you guys can utilize. I am more than happy to answer questions for you guys, just like I do with the kids. So the chat is open. So if you guys have any questions, you guys can put them there. After I'm done talking, we'll have the Q&A and I'll answer as many questions as I can. This shouldn't go super long. I know it's evening. I'm sure you guys are super busy with your families, so we'll try to keep it short. But of course, feel free to ask me as many questions as you guys have. I do love answering questions. All right. So the format for our puberty program for the kids, it's about 45 minutes. The kids are all together. So it is the boys and the girls all together in one group. This really is the best way to do it. It's really great for them to get an education on everybody's bodies, not just their own. And a lot of this stuff is universal too. So it's really great for them to be together to begin the full education of puberty and everything that comes with it. So we do 45 minutes of discussion, of doing the program, and then I save 15 minutes at the end to answer as many questions as I can. And some days the kids have no questions because they're too embarrassed to say a single word. And then some days I can't even stop them with how many questions they have. So just depends on the group, but more often than not, they usually have a ton of questions that I love to answer. All right, so let me show you guys what the program is. I'm not going to go super detailed the way that I do teach it in person. I don't want to spend 45 minutes of you guys teaching puberty, but I will just kind of go through it and just give you guys a sense on how I approach it and how I do discuss some things, just so you guys do get a sense. Oh, and before I forget, with me today is our new health educator. His name is Tristan. He is on this little Zoom call with us. His camera is on. So if you guys have any questions that you don't want to put into the group chat with it's open to everybody, but if you want to specifically ask questions, you can send your questions through the chat directly to myself or to Tristan. We are both available to answer anything. All right, so our puberty and reproductive health program. So like I said, this is something I am very passionate about, that I really do love doing. My goals with puberty and reproductive health program are to make sure these kids are getting a proper education on the changes that are going to be happening to them. I want to make sure they leave this program having a clear sense of what puberty is, how it's going to happen to each and every one of them, and making sure they are positive about it. During this whole program, I really do try to emphasize as much as I can that everything that does happen to them is normal. I remember growing up when things about puberty happening to me, it was definitely a very embarrassing time. I remember getting this talk when I was in like 5th grade from my gym teacher. It was just the girls, the guys were separated. And I remember leaving it having more questions than I came in and just kind of feeling like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. So during this, I really try to be as positive as I can to make sure it is a positive experience for them. I think that's definitely our goal, is that these kids go through puberty, hopefully in a better way that we all had to. We want to keep it going better and better for all the generations, because definitely puberty is not something that is the most pleasant, but it is something that we all have to go through. But I do try to remind them that everything they go through is normal. And that's definitely, if I have an early tip, it's the same thing you guys should do. Just remind them that what they're going through is normal. So let me tell you about our little journey. So our journey of puberty begins in a very specific part of your children's bodies. It begins in their brains. So I just start off the program by telling them how puberty actually begins, how it's a process that our bodies go through, how every single person goes through, and how it actually begins in our brains. And then I just kind of give the definition of puberty, just talking about how it really is just hormones causing our bodies to grow and to develop, going from kids to teenagers, and then finally one day into full-grown adults. Your children growing up to the adults we hope they'll be one day. So during puberty, during this section, I just kind of tell them just very generally what puberty is and just about the ages that they'll go through it. So on average, girls actually do go through puberty a little bit sooner than boys do. So the average ages for girls is around 11 to 12. For boys, the average age is around 12 to 13. But as the years are going by, kids are actually going through puberty sooner and sooner. So it's now becoming more likely that girls will enter puberty around 10, sometimes even 9 as well. And I definitely make sure to tell them that. I tell them kids will go through puberty from 8 all the way up to 15, but no matter what age it is normal. And some people go through it sooner, some later, but no matter what, it is a normal process that we all do go through. So some of your kids probably already started puberty. Some, it's probably not going to happen for a good couple years, but hopefully with this program, they will be a little bit more prepared. All right, so then we just talk about the changes that they go through. So this is definitely the fun part for me. I love telling them that they're going to get hairy and smelly. I think for me, my favorite part of doing this program is definitely embarrassing them. It's always very fun to see their faces going completely red and then the nervous smiles coming out. But the best part of the program is the change from beginning to end. In the beginning, they're all so nervous. They cannot speak a word, let alone look at each other or me directly in the eye. But by the end, everyone kind of takes a break, and then all the kids are actually pretty comfortable to ask me questions. Those are the days where I actually leave the program feeling like, all right, this was a really good day. I love seeing the difference from the beginning and at the end. So I do talk about the changes that they're going to see. So things like getting taller, things like body odor, voice changes, hair growth, mood swings, acne. So I just talk a little bit about what these changes are going to be like, what's to expect from all of them. But during all of these, I do tell them that everyone is different. So some people get super tall, some like myself stay super short, some people not very hairy, some people like myself, if anybody's Middle Eastern, super hairy. So I just kind of tell them that family background does play a part in kind of the rate of these changes. Some people are going to feel them worse than others. So just very general changes during puberty that they all will experience. Okay, so in this section, I kind of give them a little bit of advice and tips and things that maybe they should start doing, especially when these puberty changes do start to hit. And during these things, I actually think it's really awesome for parents to be included in some of this. So things things like acne. So when your kids' faces start to break out, I always tell the kids a really great thing they can start to do is just wash their face. Wash their face in the morning when you wake up and when you go to bed at night. So parents, I really do recommend when your kid is starting to get that really bad kind of puberty acne, maybe picking up an awesome face wash for them. They sell great face washes at like the grocery store. You can find some for like less than $3. You do not need anything expensive or over the top. Sometimes the best ones are actually the ones from the drugstore. So honestly, if your kid is starting to get that acne and they don't really want to talk about it with you, just go ahead and put that face wash in their bathroom, kind of give them the hint, or even bring them with you saying like, hey, like, do you want to start washing your face? Why don't you come with me and pick out your own face wash? Kind of give them that chance to have a little bit of control in that situation is always a really great thing. And again, just kind of starting that conversation. So just reminding them that acne is normal. Every person has acne. I always tell the kids, everybody has acne, so why should we cover it up? So there should be no rush for wearing makeup to cover up our acne. Acne is something that everyone has gotten. I literally just stopped having acne and I am in my 20s. So acne is something that we all experience. So there should be no shame with that one. And we shouldn't feel pressure to cover it up with concealer and makeup and globs of it that just only make it worse. Next, I do talk about how ladies, another change that I didn't mention is the fact that their breasts are going to start to grow. So that means for those girls, it is going to be bra time. Now during this, I just try to tell them that it should be a positive experience, not one that they should have to be super embarrassed by. So I tell them like, hey ladies, like make it into a fun experience, make it into something you can look forward to, not something you have to be so embarrassed by. So do that for them. Plan a really great shopping trip, put it on your calendar, invite their friends, have their fun aunt, your sister, her sister, make it into something they can get excited about. Make it into a day they can look forward to, not something they have to die of embarrassment by. So make it into a shopping trip, bring them with you so they can pick out their own. Again, making sure they have that kind of control, especially with a time where they have so little control in what's going to happen to them with puberty. So bring them with you, make it into a shopping trip, make it in something that is positive, not something that is negative. Next, I talk about shaving. Now with shaving, it honestly is up to them whether or not they want to start shaving. I do talk with the kids how when they think they're ready to start shaving, they can go for it. So those fellas, when they want to start to shave that, I call it the ghost of a mustache, when those boys, those prepubescent boys are starting to get that mustache that's almost there, but not quite. So if they do want to shave that, if the girls want to shave their armpits, their legs, but again, this is up to them. And when they do start to shave for the first time, I tell them during this program to make sure they have adult supervision. So make sure you are the adult that is providing that supervision when they want to shave for the first time, showing them that proper technique, making sure they have a razor, shaving cream, all the tools necessary so they can do it pretty easily in a safe manner. And then you can kind of show them the right technique and just show them how. We don't want these poor kids going into their parents' razors in the bathroom and then showing up to school with those little cuts on their ankles and on their face. I know for me, using my sister's razor was not very fun, not knowing how. So definitely, again, taking that time to show them the proper way to do it. All right, next. So for me, this is probably the most important part of the program. I always tell the kids, if they're not listening, well, listen up. And that is using deodorant. So using deodorant is definitely one of the biggest ones. These kids, they're starting to smell. It's by no fault of their own. It is simply our bodies producing more sweat and oil than it did before. So I tell the kids, if you hadn't started wearing deodorant before, now is a great time to begin. So make sure your children have a stick of deodorant of their own at home. Please, for the sake of their teachers and their friends in class, we want to make sure these kids do not have that bad body odor I'm sure a lot of us had growing up. So make sure they are using deodorant, making sure to show them like how much to put on and making sure they do have a stick of their own. Again, make it a trip, go to the store, bring them with you and say, hey, let's go to the deodorant aisle. You pick out your own. You pick out the scent, you pick out the kind, the brand, go for it. Make it into something they can get a little bit excited about, but just make sure they are having that stick of deodorant for themselves at home. Again, we want to help out their teachers. They do a lot, but we really don't want them to have to endure that horrible body odor every single day. Trust me, somebody who goes to a lot of schools, in every fifth grade classroom, it pretty much smells the same. Next, I just talk about how we want to encourage really great oral hygiene by making sure they're brushing their teeth twice a day. So I just remind them you got to brush your teeth once in the morning, once at night. And then I finally just talk about how we do have to practice good hygiene overall. So making sure we're bathing and showering regularly, making sure you are reminding your kids like, hey, make sure you're showering today, make sure you are bathing today, just because these kids are getting a little funky. That body odor is rough. So things like bathing, showering maybe more often than they did before can really help them out. And I do remind the kids that they don't have to wash their hair every time. I know every child has different textures of hair. So I always tell the kids, no matter what hair you have, hop in the shower and just wash your body. So get those amazing little caps, cover that hair. We want to keep it protected, but make sure you're still washing your body with plenty of soap and warm water. So definitely make sure you are encouraging that. If you notice your kid is smelling a little funkier than usual, maybe just remind them that they should be kind of showering more often than they did before. Even though they're not playing in the mud, they are still getting pretty smelly. All right, so that is the beginning stuff. This is the stuff the kids are usually fine hearing about. It's when we get to the next section, the kids start to squirm. So this is the part where we actually start to talk about the reproductive systems for both males and females. And like I said, we do teach this completely together. And this stuff is really important. The first thing these kids ask me if I don't talk about this is, well, why does puberty happen? So we have to explain the why before we explain what is going to happen to them. So I do this by starting off small. We start small and work our way up. So I start literally as small as you can go with cells. So by this point in your kids' education, they haven't really learned about cells yet. So for those of you who remember biology, we are not talking about the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. We are talking about reproductive cells. So I just explained that human beings have these really cool cells that have their own job. So every cell in our body has its own job to do. Our blood cells, our skin cells, our brain cells, every cell has its own job. And our reproductive cells have their own job too. So I tell the kids exactly like this. The reason we have these cells is when human beings want to have another baby, want to have another human being in this world, you need each of these cells to do it. So I call this like the formula for life. I say for a human being to make another human being, you need one egg cell plus one sperm cell equals one person. That's as far as I explain it. I don't want to go too into detail with how these come together. So take a breath. I do not talk about sex in any way. I don't even reference the parts coming together in any way. So I just want to make that very clear. I know parents want to do that on their own time, and it's not for me to decide, but I do just explain that these cells are things that we have, and in order to make a human, you need each of these cells to do it. And that's kind of where I leave it. Occasionally the kids do have questions about this. I'll talk a little bit more about that later and how I respond. I do explain with these cells, that's what makes us related to our families. So when we look in the mirror and we see that we have the same eyes as our mom and the same hair color as our dad, it's because we inherit those things in each of these cells when they come together to form all of us. And the kids actually get pretty interested. They're like, oh my God, I have my mom's eyes, but my hair is the same as my dad's, and I'm as tall as my dad. So the kids actually get really interested in this part. All right, so we do females first. We do the female reproductive system and then the guys later. But I do remind the guys that just because we're not talking about them does not mean they cannot respond, cannot pay attention, and actually be interested in this. The favorite questions for me during this program are actually when the guys have questions about the female reproductive system. It just shows that they're interested, that they're paying attention, and they do want to learn. So I do make sure that they are all listening, not just the girls and not just the guys, vice versa when we get to their section. So we start off by doing just a little trivia question. So parents, feel free to answer. How many egg cells does a female have when she goes through puberty? Just trying to get the kids thinking a little bit. So by puberty, how many eggs does a female actually have in her body? So 3,000, 30,000, 300,000, 3 million. Jeopardy started earlier tonight. So for those of you who are dying to know, the answer is actually C, 300,000. So on average, a female is going to have around 300,000 egg cells in our bodies by the time we start puberty. A lot of egg cells. And I just explained to the kids, our bodies make a lot of things just because it's kind of like an insurance policy. We want to back up just in case of any health problems or just in case things go wrong as we go through life, as things do. All right, so here's where we actually talk about the female reproductive system. So I just kind of go through these parts and just name them and just explain a little bit about what they do. So I explain like the ovary, that is where the egg cells are going to be. I explain the fallopian tubes connect the ovary to the uterus. They love hearing about how babies, when a woman is pregnant, it's actually inside the uterus. Their eyes usually pop out of their skulls when I say that. As you guys know, your kids probably grow up thinking, oh, when a woman's pregnant, the baby is in her stomach, right? So the kids usually have no idea that the baby's actually inside the uterus. So when I explain that, their mouths just like drop. They like cannot even believe it. So I do love explaining that part and also talking about how big that uterus gets to fit that very large baby. When I'm doing the puberty program, I have this cool little pack of, I literally call it my bag of fetuses. It has different models of fetuses just to kind of show how little they start to get how big they end up. So it also includes little mini uteruses as well. Not every person can say they have a bag like that in their car. I do. Then I just explain the cervix opening in between the uterus, and then finally the vagina as well. So I am not afraid to say these parts. The kids definitely do not want me to say these parts, but it's a part of learning. All right, so then I explain the process of menstruation. For the females, this is definitely probably the most important part of the program for them. Getting their periods is one of the biggest things to happen to girls during our lifetimes. I still remember when I got mine down to the day. It's a very hard situation when it happens for the first time. You're not prepared and when you have no idea what's going on. So I just want to prepare them as much as I can in this moment that I have this 45 minutes that you get your students to teach them. So I just do explain the process of menstruation and why it happens. So again, I do have to explain that why, because if I don't, that is the first question they ask me. So I just kind of introduce the topic. I just say once a month when a female starts puberty, one of those egg cells leaves the ovary and it hangs out in the fallopian tube. And then I kind of do this little analogy to explain the uterus. So I explain like when you guys know your friends are coming over this weekend, you make your room look really nice. You make your bed, you put your dirty clothes in the laundry, you get your video games out. You want your room to look nice for your friend who's coming over. That's what the uterus does every single month. And during that ovulation phase, the uterus is essentially preparing itself. So that's how I explain it. And then I just say when a woman is not pregnant that month, which is pretty much every month for those select few times of our lifetime, then the uterus gets rid of all that extra stuff it didn't need. We call this the lining is shedding. So I just explained to the kids, a period is just your uterus getting rid of all that extra stuff it did not need that month. And that is what their periods actually are. And again, they usually do understand this pretty well. I actually get so many questions about periods from the girls. Obviously, I am a woman, so I do love talking about it with them. I want to make sure these ladies definitely understand periods as much as they can for when it does happen to them. And even the guys do still have a lot of questions about this because not many of the boys get an opportunity to learn about menstruation the way I talk about it. So again, that's my favorite part of the day is when the boys start asking me questions about girls' periods in an actually mature way, more mature than you guys would expect. So I do explain how long it lasts, how it is not always the same every single month. And I do explain to them how periods are not exactly the most comfortable. So periods are usually the most difficult when females actually first get them. So do just make sure you are talking about their periods. And if they are truly like very uncomfortable, periods can be very, very painful sometimes, especially in those early years when they're not very used to them. So make sure you guys have everything necessary for these ladies when they do start their periods. So make sure you guys are starting that conversation of whether they want to use things like tampons, using things like pads. When you know your daughter's period is like due on time, have things like Tylenol and Advil ready. Even invest in getting like a heating pack. For me, heating packs may have been the holy grail for me. So just making sure having all the things necessary for when they do start their periods, because it can be really hard for them to ask. They don't want to admit that they're in a lot of pain, that they're uncomfortable, that they know fully what's going on to them. So we want to make sure they are prepared for this. I do my part by explaining the best I can, but we definitely want parents to do their part by making sure the kids have everything they need. So have these ladies having their gear. I really recommend for parents whose daughters haven't started their periods yet, make a little emergency pack. If you want to put it in your daughter's backpack or their locker or cubby at school, whatever they have, put like a pad, maybe an extra pair of underwear or like a little pair of jeans, just in case for when they do get their period for the first time and it happens to be at school. God, I hope not. I hope it doesn't happen for the first time at school, but unfortunately, they do spend most of the day at school, so it may very well happen. So maybe make a little emergency pack they can keep in their backpacks for if this does happen. I wish for me, I had this growing up, those situations when you get it and you're not expecting it. So maybe have something like that. So this way they feel a little bit more calm to go to school, not worrying they're going to have blood on their clothes. Again, the nurse is still there, but it's great for them to have something of their own too. All right, so we go right from the females to the males. So it is the fellas' turn. So with fellas, they do not have to worry about things like periods. So I do not spend quite as much time on the guys as I do the girls, just because They're simple. You guys, when you guys went through puberty, it's significantly simpler than when the girls did. So just like with the girls, I just go through these parts, just say when their names and just kind of briefly say a little bit what they do. So I just say things like the testicles, that is where sperm cells are made. I do say the difference between males actually make sperm cells, females are born with egg cells. So I want to make sure they understand that. And again, I just go through these parts. I just kind of briefly explain what they do, not all of them, but just kind of the main ones. All right, and then just like before, we do a little trivia question with the kids. So I ask them how many sperm cells are made each month. Parents, feel free to take a guess which one you guys think. It's actually, it's unbelievable how many it actually is. So on average, mature males make actually around 12 billion sperm cells each month. The kids, usually when I reveal this answer, their eyes are popping out of their skulls. They cannot even believe that guys are able to make so many. And again, I do try to keep this positive. So I tell the guys, like, it's amazing what your bodies are capable of. Like, ladies, we go through all this stuff, but guys, every second of every day, they're making thousands of sperm cells. So it's really amazing the power of the human body, what we're doing every second of every day. So for the boys, things do happen to them that are out of their control, just like with girls. So girls cannot control having their periods. Well, for the boys, they cannot control having nocturnal emissions. Well, some of you are thinking, what is that? I've never heard of that. Wet dreams. So things that are going to happen to the boys. So sometimes during the middle of the night, sperm cells actually leave their penis while they're fast asleep. This is something they have no control over. So I tell the boys, you may wake up one morning and there's something on your pajamas or your sheets or your underwear. If you do see something a little bit different than usual, you probably had a nocturnal emission. So my advice for the boys when this happens, I tell them, hey, pop those clothes in the laundry. And that's really it. Again, guys do not have as much work as the girls when it comes to puberty. So I just tell them, if this happens to you, it is completely normal. And it is something you guys have no control over. Again, I try to make this as positive as possible and remind them it is normal. It is their bodies doing what our bodies do. We can't control having to breathe. We can't control our hearts beating. And boys cannot control having a wet dream. All right, so then we wrap it up by talking about fertilization. So I do have to talk about this just because, again, we have to explain the why. So I just say the reason we talk about this and the reason we're learning about this is the reason we go through puberty at all is because when adults want to have kids one day, you need each of these cells to do it. So I just explained the process of fertilization. Exactly what you see on the screen is what I say. I just say one egg comes together with one sperm, forming one human. All right, so this is just a cool diagram that I show to explain this whole process, just so they can see it a little bit more visually. So I just say once a month, one egg cell leaves the ovary, hangs out in the fallopian tube. When an adult wants to have a baby, it's fertilized by a sperm cell. It divides, attaches to the uterus, where it forms into a baby over the course of 9 months. And then I just show them, we talk about briefly the stages of development. They usually cannot believe that month 1 is actually what a baby looks like. So I do love comparing month 1 to month 9, because usually they're just kind of like thinking that's what a baby looks like. They have no idea that a baby looks like that in the early days. So I just kind of compare and contrast month 1 to month 9, and just so that they can visually see the stages of development. So surprisingly, the kids actually really love talking about babies. I would say my number one question is actually questions about pregnancy. So these kids, they're always so curious about how babies actually grow and develop. And I really do love answering questions about them. So I just talk about how after 9 months goes by, it is time to deliver that baby. And I say the reason they call it labor, it's because it's hard work. So I always tell the kids, when you get home today, give a woman who's delivered a baby a big hug. Whether it's moms, aunts, grandparents, sisters, they all deserve it. I have not had a baby yet. We'll see one day in the future. So I always just tell them, make sure you're giving women who've had a baby a big hug, because they worked very hard to bring all of these babies into the world. They deserve it. So if you guys get any hugs surprisingly that day, you're welcome. All right, and I just kind of end the program by talking about twins. They love hearing about this. Twin thing is so interesting to them. So maybe some of you parents don't actually know the difference between identical and fraternal twins. So with identicals, it's one sperm and one egg that come together, and it actually splits off to form 2 identical twins. With fraternals, women, sometimes our bodies, they actually ovulate 2 eggs instead of 1, and then those 2 eggs are fertilized by 2 sperm cells, forming two separate babies. And again, these kids' minds are usually blown by this point, but this just kind of puts them into a whole other universe. They're so interested in twins, and they love to hear about like triplets and quadruplets, and they always have a million questions about, can a woman have 10 kids? Can they have 20? So that imaginations take over by this point. All right, and that is actually the end of the program. So by this point, the kids usually have a million questions, and I always have hopefully a million answers. So that is the program. That is everything I show them. That is generally actually how I talk about things. Obviously, it's a little more detailed when I do, but hopefully that gave you guys all a good sense about how I approach certain topics, things I do talk about, things I don't. So I am going to switch it over actually to our little puberty tips for you guys. So this is actually your program now. So you saw the kids program. Now it's time for your talk. So talking to your kids about puberty. So obviously I only have about an hour with all of your children to do this puberty program. I wish I had longer. I could talk about this for a week straight if you really let me. Obviously, you can tell I do a lot of talking, but I only have about an hour. So in that hour, I do try to talk about as much as I can, but I can't get to everything. So we definitely recommend parents furthering that conversation when they do get home from school. So talking to your children about puberty and just a little bit of advice I can give you. Obviously, I have not had kids, so everybody is different and everybody parents differently. But just from an educator's perspective, these are just a couple tips maybe you guys can use. Number one, and this is seriously the most important one, and that is educate yourself. So if you're looking at this program and you're just like, man, I forgot a lot of that, refresh yourself. It is okay to admit you have forgotten some things. You all have not learned about puberty probably since a lot of you were around 10 too, just like your kids. And it is okay to say, you know what? I need a little refresh. So feel free to educate yourselves, making sure to go to great websites that do have good and reliable information. So I have a couple here on your screen. This one, amaze.org, they have really awesome videos. So if you ever want to show your kids some really cool videos on puberty, they have so many on every topic you can think of. Highly recommend that one. I use it all the time. Next, so start the conversation first. As much as we want your kids to go to you anytime they have questions. This is a topic they are embarrassed about. I try to reduce that embarrassment as much as I can, but sometimes they do feel a little uncomfortable going to you guys about certain things. So you may want to be the one to start the conversation first. Approach them, because if you wait around for them to come to you, you may be waiting a little while. So do start that conversation. A really great advice I can give you, this is direct from my boss. She's had 3 boys. So her way of giving her boys the talk, she brought them for a car ride, because when your kids are in the car, you don't have to look at each other and they have no way to escape. So if you want to start that conversation, take them on a nice long road trip. They have nowhere to go, and then you guys don't actually have to make eye contact during this. So that is a really great time to have some alone time and maybe away from their siblings so they don't have to eavesdrop. And this way you guys can get some private time so they can ask you guys any questions they may still have or things that you still want to talk about. Okay, next, talk about it sooner rather than later. So don't wait. So as much as we like to believe that our kids are going to stay kids forever, they do mature faster than we want them to. So a really great time to start this conversation is actually after this program. So maybe when they get home from school that day or a couple days later, kind of bring it up, saying like, hey, what did you learn about with puberty? Do you want to learn a little bit more? And maybe take some time to explain some things a little bit more deeply that you feel comfortable talking to them about. Again, it's better that they learn about this sooner rather than later. A lot of parents ask me, well, are they a little early? Aren't they a little young to learn about this stuff? Trust me, they aren't. And the last thing we want is for them to hear certain words from their friends and Google it. All right. We don't want your children finding certain websites way before they're even ready. So it is better that you guys explain this to them. So this way they're not Googling things and finding things that we really don't want them to see yet. Next, make sure you guys are using actual body part language. I would not recommend making up different nicknames or different words for certain parts of their bodies. Just say the words themselves. Say things like penis and vagina and breasts, all right? Trust me, your kids, they will get over the embarrassment eventually. But making sure we are using body part language is very important. This way, if there is, God forbid, something ever wrong, they can go to you and then you'll know what they're actually talking about too, okay? So make sure you guys are using those words, as embarrassing as it might be for you. It is important that we are normalizing them. All of those parts I named are parts of our bodies, just like our brains, our hearts, our lungs, and that's kind of the way we have to treat them. It's the parts that we're born with. And then finally, try your best to seem comfortable. I know even for you guys, this can be very embarrassing. Not every parent wants to sit down with their child and talk about puberty, but sometimes it is something that we have to do. I try to do as best as I can. After a little while, you get over it very quickly, but do just try your best. Make sure you are seeming comfortable. Take a couple breaths if you need to, practice in the mirror, try to get those nervous giggles out, because if you seem embarrassed, they're going to be embarrassed. So the more comfortable you are, the more comfortable they're going to be to ask you guys some questions. All right, you guys. So that is going to be everything from me. So those are all my tips. Those are all the different parts of the program. So I hope I gave you guys a clear understanding of how I talk about puberty. If you guys have any questions, now is the time to ask. You guys can put your questions in the chat right now if you guys have any. Hope that was interesting. Somebody asked, with all the information on the internet, will this program guide kids on what to watch / access and what not to? Yeah, so I try to guide them as much as I can. So if we provide the information, if we're telling them what these parts are, what they do, it's less likely they're going to Google things like, so if they hear the word penis from the first time from their friends, that's probably what they're going to Google. So it's better they get this information from us, making sure they're getting the terminology from us rather than going straight to Google and finding things they're definitely not ready for. Absolutely. Okay, somebody said, what would you, would I say, what would be my answer when they ask specifics about sex? So just being honest, you'd be surprised how mature our children actually are. So just being honest is really the best way to go about it, making sure we are explaining the differences, making sure they explain all the mechanics and everything. Again, just being honest really is kind of the best way to go about it, making sure you are comfortable first before you discuss things with them. And again, you can tell them as much as you want to. So if you feel like they're not quite ready to learn about certain things when it comes to sex, you don't have to start it quite yet. But like I said, with the internet, it is better that you actually do it sooner rather than later. Again, the last thing we want is these kids to start Googling and ending up on websites they're definitely not ready for. So making sure you are having that conversation with them. Again, it's on your time. It's up to you guys whether you think your kids are ready to learn about it, but usually they're more ready than you believe. Oh, somebody asked me, what would be my answer if a kid asked me how the sperm gets to the egg? Yeah, this question definitely comes up. Obviously, this is not something all parents want me to go into, and that is perfectly okay. I am not the one who gets to decide that. It is up to you parents, whether your kids want to learn about that sooner rather than later. But when this question does come up, whether how that sperm cell gets to the egg cell, I just explain, you know what, that is a really great question. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to get in that one. Feel free to ask adults at home if you're still curious about that question. That's usually kind of the way I word it. Somebody asked, do they have any behavioral changes? Absolutely. These kids are going through mood swings. So during puberty, there are a rush of hormones in their bodies, more than have ever been there before, way more than usual. So all of those hormones actually overwhelm their brains and trigger mood swings. So if you guys ever remember getting into fights with your parents and just wanting to scream and cry all at the same time, your kids probably feel the same way. So they absolutely will have some behavioral changes. They may not be very dramatic, but they definitely will have a little bit of changes. So you may notice them crying a little bit more, angrier than they were before. It is because of those mood swings. But luckily, there is a light at the end of those tunnel, and those mood swings do calm down as puberty calms down later on in life. Somebody asked, do I reinforce by asking parents before they want to shave? Yep, I definitely always say to the kids, it's up to them whether they want to shave or not, but make sure that when they do, they have a parent or an adult at home present. Again, I don't want your kids having any accidents with the razor, getting into razors they shouldn't be using at the moment, and making sure they're knowing how to shave properly. So I do always tell the kids before you ever shave, make sure you have an adult present. Oh, and if anybody wants to unmute themselves to ask questions, you're also more than welcome to do that. That is okay. I'll stop sharing my screen. Oh my goodness, sorry. I thought I did this before. I did this the other day when I was teaching a program. I stopped sharing my screen and I thought I had closed Zoom out altogether. So I just kind of had one of those like heart-stopping moments where you thought you ended on everybody? Somebody asked for boys, when can we expect the puberty age? For sure. For boys, it's going to be around, so I say for girls, it's around 11 to 12. For boys, it's around 12 to 13. But with our current generation, they're actually starting puberty a lot sooner and sooner. A lot of scientists believe it's possibly the foods that we're eating, the environment we're currently in. So it is more likely that they're going to start puberty around like 11, sometimes even 10 too. But boys typically are a little bit later than females are. So that's why the girls, we say like girls mature faster than guys. It's because biologically we actually do. So girls actually start puberty around 11 to 12. For a lot of boys, it's around 12 to 13. But again, every single kid is different. So we can say 12 to 13, but again, there are some boys who are just going to start around 10 and some of them who might not start until 15. But no matter what age, it is totally normal. Good question. These are all great questions, by the way. I really love answering them. And you guys, the questions that the kids ask, they never get old. Oh my goodness. Those questions the kids have, it's everything you can think of. All right, are there any more questions? If you have any, now is the time to ask before we end everything.
We do provide a follow-up program that we do in the schools. Usually it's the nurse and she'll take the females, and the phys ed teacher or a male staff member or building principal will take the males, and it just provides an opportunity for them to ask questions. Usually they will pass out index cards and let them write down any questions they have, and then they collect them all and just answer the questions as they go through. Again, they won't get into anything, you know, about how the act of sex or anything like that. You know, we keep this very age appropriate for all of our students, and they get more into the just the hygiene end of things for both the boys and the girls.
Right.
Are there any other questions?
All right, it looks like kind of slowing down. If that's the case, then I think we'll end about another minute or so. I hope I explained everything well. I always get so nervous with parents. I'm so used to kids that I always forget talking to adults sometimes. So I hope you all enjoyed. I hope you all have a really great night. And I hope you're all doing well during this pandemic. I made it this far. Hopefully it's not too much longer.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yep, thank you so much. All right, bye everybody. Have a great rest of your night then.
Thank you. Thank you so much for what you do for the kids.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, this is a hard topic to, this is not an easy one, I'm sure. I just wanted to say, I'm sure that you do, but like encourage, you know, because this is a very vulnerable time for all of the kids, and who does not have deodorant on today and who maybe is going through puberty. Is that also, I'm sure, reinforced, like, you know, kind of like sticking together, not picking on one another, maybe encouraging those to, do you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
don't make fun of someone who smells, or, you know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Absolutely. When we get to the part about body odor, I tell the kids, every single person has body odor, from kids all the way up to adults. So if they're smelling their armpits and they're kind of getting that funky smell, trust me, they're not alone. That is something I say, I really emphasize, because I always wanted these kids to leave this program feeling like what they're going through is absolutely normal. I don't want these kids to feel bad about having body odor, because that's the case. We all feel pretty bad. So definitely, for sure. I always make sure to tell them we all stink, myself included.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you again for offering this program. It's probably very beneficial for them. Thank you.
Thank you. And I love doing it. It never gets old. I teach it basically about 100 times and it never gets old. All right, everyone. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your night then. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.